Thank you very much, Chris. I'm Professor David Daley. I am MindTech Theme Lead for Neurodevelopmental Disorders, and it is my great pleasure to chair this really interesting debate this afternoon. So the motion before the House is that artificial intelligence virtual human chatbot therapists can bridge the treatment gap in mental health. It's a very intriguing motion. I'm not entirely sure where I stand on the motion yet, and so I took the opportunity this morning while I was having breakfast to ask Alexa. And Alexa's response was that she didn't understand the question. I'm very confident that our panel members are more informed and that they will be even more entertaining. So very briefly, let me introduce you to the panel before we kick the debate off. For the motion, we have Dr. Michel Valstar, who's Associate Professor of Computer Science at the University of Nottingham, and also Dr. Sophie Bostock from Big Health. And against the motion is Dr. Elvira Perez, who used to work for me, and she is, I forget your title, is it Associate Professor of Digital Mental Health?
Yes.
Okay, and also against the motion is Alison, our wonderful guest speaker, who you've just met. So each...
I'm also a doctor, by the way.
and a cat-loving Oyster card holder. I'm very sorry about that, and I'm duly chastised. Well done. Each person will get a maximum of 3 minutes to present their view of the motion, and then we will throw it open for questions. But before we do that, I would like the House to vote. So if you support the motion, and if you feel that AI virtual human chatbot therapists can bridge the treatment gap in mental health, then please raise your hand. It's so hard to tell. I'm not going to bother. I would say that's approximately half the room. So I think the motion is, the House is as divided as I am. I'm not sure where we stand on the motion. We are in the hands of our excellent panelists, and I'm going to hand you over to Michel Valstar to kick us off. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I'm going to stand. So first of all, I think what you can do with these machines is they can actually include machine vision and machine analysis of your voice and what you say and how you say it, when you say it. And that can pick up the sort of objective signals that will allow much more subtle analysis of your behavior than a human could. And what's more importantly, it will allow it to be exactly the same analysis for everybody, which makes it very easy to actually compare. And from that, we can get new baselines and new metrics for what is, dare I say, normal. There's no such word, but at least we can have a national levels. Also, if you do this at scale, I think you can start doing real-time epidemiological studies. You can start seeing what's happening where. You can start correlating that against other factors, and basically then starting to think about more personalized treatment. By the way, I don't think we have to think about virtual humans in such a sense. I don't think it has to be embodied. If you've seen the movie Her, that's equally a sort of an interactive artificial intelligence that could do the same thing. So there will be many different ways in which we could, many shapes and forms in which we could interact with such things. And when it comes to treatment, well, in the end, I think it's outcomes that matter. And I would say give us a chance to actually try this and actually also measure outcomes. Let people tell their interactive AI what their outcomes are. Let people tell them how they're feeling. And you can record it in the same way. All of this can be done anonymously, Mac. But of course, we have to discuss how we share data with other people, with doctors, etc. And I hope that we can go also, it can be done in a near zero cost treatment, but I think we'll hear more about it later. And I think we might also learn new things about new subtypes of, let's say, depression, perhaps what therapy works for different people. And all this is possible because you're having a integral system for actually delivering therapy and measuring people, monitoring people at the same time. And that might sound very cold, but I'm sure we can deliver it in a warm way as well.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, Sophie.
I don't trust myself to speak for 3 minutes. I've written it down. Right, bridging the gap. Let's face it, it's not just a gap, it's a huge widening chasm. Imagine that everyone in this room suffered from a mental health disorder. Statistically, this year, the first 2 rows in this room will start treatment this year. The front row will complete treatment, and you guys will recover. The rest of you, you're on your own. Perhaps you don't know how to get help, or more likely, you feel too tired, ashamed, afraid, or overwhelmed to ask for it. Even the most optimistic estimates for IAPT expansion will leave over 5 million people outside the treatment door in England alone. 20,000 service users and carers told the Mental Health Task Force to prioritise prevention, early intervention, and support for self-help. Perhaps they realise that if we keep waiting to treat people at the point when they can't cope on their own, we'll never have enough therapists to meet demand. Early intervention and tailored self-help are the tiers of the step care model where virtual humans and the digital channels that they inhabit really come into their own. Sleepio is a fully automated online program which uses a virtual therapist called the Prof and his narcoleptic dog Pavlov to treat people with poor sleep using CBT for insomnia. It was based on an established self-help book, but the interactivity gives it extra va-va-voom. The Prof can personalise advice, help you track your progress, send reminders, deliver in the moment, techniques 24/7. Sleepio was recently tested in the OASIS trial, the largest ever RCT for a psychological intervention. After 6 months, 1,800 poor sleepers randomised to Sleepio were not only sleeping better, they had lower levels of anxiety, depression, paranoia, and hallucinations. Not one of them saw a human therapist. In London, goodthinking.uk is a brand new NHS mental wellbeing service which will exclusively use digital channels to support people outside traditional healthcare services. If you're Googling "can't sleep" late at night, you can click an online ad, answer a few questions, and you can not only get clinically validated feedback, but you can meet the Prof, free of charge. No stigma, no delay, just on-demand, evidence-based advice. Now, I don't believe for 1 minute that virtual therapists can solve the treatment gap. Poverty, inequality, social and environmental detachment are beyond the Prof's algorithms. Humans have to tackle the root causes of our modern epidemic of poor mental health. And we must also provide in-person clinical care to those who can't help themselves. But I believe we'll have more time, energy, and resource to tackle those things if we use technology to empower whole populations to access evidence-based self-help in the meantime. Thanks.
Perfectly to time, thank you. We now move on to the case against the motion. Elvira.
Thank you, David. So I hope I'm bringing a bit of a more critical perspective here. I think technology has taken over, and I think it's not society driving technology. I think it's the digital economy now driving society, and I'm not very comfortable with that. I know that because I don't feel I have an option not to be online. If I do that, I may lose probably my job, my family, and my mental health. So there is no choice anymore, and I'm not happy with that. I think in 10, 15 years down the line, we will have very sophisticated and effective virtual human therapists. They will be there 24/7. They will have very sophisticated algorithms that will be able to predict which school of therapy may be more suitable. So they will be very personalized. And what really concerns me is that right now we are focusing on making that technology to work, and we are losing a bit of side perspective from what are the implications for relationships, what are the fundamental implications for the future of society? Who is thinking about all that? Where are the philosophers of technology? Where are the ethicists? And I would like to say that I think the reason why these human virtual therapists may work very well in the future is because we've passively been giving lots of personal data to Facebook, to Google, and if you are able to upload 10, 15 years, or where children is going to be probably all their lives, those systems are actually going to be extremely powerful. Yes, virtual agents will be, I think, able to bridge that gap. Regulation cannot catch up with how fast we are working. As researchers, we are pushed to produce very exciting results. We want impact, and we may lose sight. So what I will urge is by responsible innovation and to make sure any team, and we are very used to very multidisciplinary teams, I would love to see more philosophers and people that have the space to reflect on where we are going and where we want to be. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elvira. And now to end the case against Dr. Faulkner.
Thank you. Well, you know most of my points really already, but one of the first things I would say is what treatment gap? You know, there are many treatment gaps. There is not just one. And my concern is that that artificial intelligence, that technology generally can actually potentially perpetuate some of those gaps rather than bridge them. So it's a question of looking in the right direction, learning from what is already out there. The second point that I also made is about what we know about psychological therapies now, is that what the evidence tells us is that the therapist is the most important part of the process. And if that is the case, how do we reproduce the therapeutic alliance via an artificial chatbot? I truly believe, and particularly having spent the morning with you all today, that technology has a huge amount to offer. There are lots of ways in which technology can clearly be integrated into mental health care, and in some of the ways in which I talked about peer support and self-help online, yes, I can absolutely see that. What I cannot see is virtual human chatbot therapists having any kind of a place whatsoever, and I really do believe that. I think one of the things that I would say is, what is the evidence? What is the evidence? Because over the past 20 years, really, as survivor researchers, we've been looking at what we really mean when we talk about evidence-based therapies, treatments, whatever. And sometimes that evidence does not actually accord with what service users and survivors consider their priorities. Quite often it's very symptom-focused. It doesn't actually look at what people value in their lives. So I would say evidence for the future, the research around this kind of technology, must learn from the past, must learn from how we have made mistakes in the past around the outcomes that we use in research, the outcomes that really matter to people. We need to learn from the past in that respect. So evidence-based, always look at the evidence and really critically look at it. So that's my argument.
Alison, thank you very much. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, from last year's debate, the most interesting part was taking the views of the panel and then having them reflected back in some really interesting questions. We have some time for questions. We don't want long-winded anecdotes or observations. We need short, focused questions for the panel. Please, who would like to start off? Dave, there's a gentleman in the middle, in the blue shirt.
One of the things that I see over and over again is fear of the digital social media providers, but they're also the only people who have the reach to actually deliver a product to users. And so I ask, everyone in the room actually, like, how are we engaging the people who have the users already and have the data? Because it's viewed as a very negative thing. It could be a tremendously positive thing if they're doing it right, you know? And so I think engaging those people are very key. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, don't be like Google and sign silly contracts with a hospital in London that gives you all use of that data in perpetuity, right? So there is a reason for the fear, and that is perhaps because of motivation, right? Those companies are not motivated by social well-being; they're motivated by profit, and perhaps that is the wrong way of doing that. That's a political statement, I know, but so I think we need to work with them, clearly, because they do have to reach, but it has to be a very controlled interaction.
Just quickly add the project that I mentioned, Good Thinking, which is this digital mental wellbeing service. We're partnering with them, and they're working using Facebook ads, Google ads, testing responses. That's something that we're currently having to pay for, and obviously it would be nice if they helped us out with that. We'll talk to them, see what we can get.
Can I just say something as well about the fear? I think the fear is very real for people, you know, using mental health technology, that something may happen as a result. There was I can't remember the details of it, but there was an app that was brought in by the Samaritans, and the idea was that somebody was going to actually act on if somebody said that they were feeling suicidal. Well, that's the kind of thing that people will not engage with an app that's going to be doing something like that, because the fear is that the mental health app will be, you know, suddenly enter into the debate rather than having that freedom to sit at the computer and to chat to somebody or to use whatever it is that you're using. So I think the fear is very real about the use of people's data in ways that we don't want it to be used.
Yeah, and also just to add, is also the power of money, unfortunately, but also any online system, any system it has vulnerabilities, and there are potential for being hacked. No, maybe not now, maybe in the future. So that's, yeah, again, that's a real fear.
They're already doing it, though. So that's my worry, is that they're doing it, right? So if you don't engage, then they're going to do it on their own. They're going to be motivated by money and not by clinical outcomes. So failure to engage doesn't stop it.
Yep.
Thank you. Hello, my name's Victoria from Habitat. I'd like to speak to Elvira's point or question about whether we're being ruled by the digital economy, and also just to say how thoroughly refreshing it was to have Alison speak about the needs of people with lived experience first and digital second, which is absolutely the right way around in my view. I think philosophers and ethicists and social sciences are talking about very similar issues, but from different perspectives, but we're not joining up the conversation. So my question to the panel is, and my challenge to MindTech actually is, how do we bring more social scientists, philosophers and ethicists into this conversation? So we're having a more thoughtful debate, and one that isn't being led and driven by the digital economy.
I think that's a very, very good question, and I would welcome a wider involvement of people from those different disciplines that you've mentioned. I think Iris Elliott this morning from the Mental Health Foundation talked about ethics and human rights, which I think those aspects can be brought in so much better by some of the other disciplines that you mentioned, definitely.
Yes, and also I'm aware that EPSRC, one of the research councils, they are promoting a very specific framework called responsible research and innovation, and it's going to be a little bit like PPI for NIHR funding applications. You have to describe how you thought about the ethical implications, and if you've consulted with a stakeholder, how you've informed your design, making sure that whatever you're doing is desirable for society.
Okay, thank you. We have a question just here in the middle, in the 5th or 6th row.
Good afternoon. So there's this constant reference about the importance of the human therapeutic relationship as the basis of therapy, and this therapeutic relationship can be of whatever type. So my question is a bit provocative, because this emerges at the same time that there is more digital opportunities, virtual opportunities, but also like volunteering and self-help care. So I would ask the panel if they would see a future without human therapists.
I guess I work on...
It's not the motion, remember, but it's interesting.
I think, yeah, we're already seeing therapy. We have seen therapy for decades without therapists. It's called self-help. All we're doing here is using technology to enhance self-help. And in terms of the therapeutic alliance, it doesn't have to be a therapeutic alliance with a human, actually. The feedback that we get from users is that they can still form a relationship with the prof. And I didn't have time to include it, but I have one comment I was just going to read out from a user. I didn't have much hope, and it did seem silly, but the prof was a great little character to guide me through this, supportive and non-judgmental. He's changed my life. He's an animated character, but he still has a therapeutic value.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I think the children nowadays, and probably the children of our children, they are going to be more used to interact with technology, well, as soon as they are born. And I'm aware in Japan there are lots of robots that are there for care, also being introduced in nurseries, robots that can play, that can dance, they entertain the kids, but at the same time can monitor body temperature. So if someone has a bit of a temperature, they can flag it quickly. So I think children will be more used to interact with machines that are not perceived as machines. I think our generation is more aware that human component is crucial, but I don't know about what's coming next.
Oh, we have a question just here.
Hello, my name's Jeremy Christie. I'm from Zinc. We're a tech startup in mental health. I just wanted to ask, one of the problems about the commercial part of you producing AI is that it's very easy to produce rather asinine and rather trite interventions and then claim absolute efficacy for them in detailed mental health problems. And I just wondered how we actually treat at depth using AI.
I'll have to speculate here a little bit. So we're at the beginning, okay? So when it comes to virtual humans and interactive AI, I think we're very much nearing the hype that we were promised earlier. We're not even at the top yet. I think it will go down very quickly. I think this will take years and years and years to understand. We need to understand also how people interact with these things. I've been toting recently something called a machine theory of mind. We need to understand how those machines work in order for us to build a relation with them. We need to know how they work as well, right? And that can't be done by just building deep learning systems. That means we need to deal with accountability, explainability, formal assurances of how these things work. We're talking about a fairly long thing. That's not to say that we can't already build tried, if you want to say, call it that way, tools that help. And I think in the end, my view is we want to build interventions that help people. I really agree, we need to work with service users on sort of making meaningful outcomes and measures of meaningful outcome. It doesn't help that our political overlords keep banging on with productivity and that kind of stuff when it's actually well-being that we should be thinking about. But still, I think we can already build things that improve outcome. I think we can measure that, and I think we can go deeper and deeper as we go along. How? Well, we can talk about that later. Yeah.
Before we go on, I just wanted to reframe the motion a bit, and we'll get to your question then. So I think I think Alison alluded to the fact that our motion wasn't as well written as it should be because she questioned which treatment gap, which I think is very valid. And I think Sophie makes a very strong, persuasive case for the PROF and its use in sleep problems. I would like to hear very briefly from the panel, where do you think chatbots would work best in terms of mental health problems, and where do you think they might work less well?
Don't look at me.
I'm looking at all of the panel, but Elvira.
I think it is an individual choice. I don't think it will work for specific conditions. It will be working for specific people that are more in tune to maybe interact with a chatbot.
So you think it's an individual difference thing? You're a chatbotter or you're not?
Yeah,
okay.
But that's just a guess. Okay. It's not condition specific.
Sophie, would you agree with that?
Definitely we need to give people a choice. I think prevention and early intervention is the most kind of obvious arena. If someone is desperately in crisis, then I am the last person in the world who's going to give them a chatbot. But I think that when people are starting to get worried, they're starting to recognize they've got a problem, but they're not at a level where they believe enough in that problem to go and seek help from a medical professional to actually find something out in a very non-judgmental, sort of anonymized way. If it's clinically validated, it could be helpful.
But what if they're in crisis, but they can't be seen?
I think that would be dangerous, personally.
But if there is nobody to see them, do you think nothing would be better than a chatbot?
Chatbot,
I think we don't know, to be honest. But my first indication would be it's probably dangerous. Yeah, but yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there's a level of self-control that's necessary. People need to be able to engage with it themselves. And I mean, perhaps one thing that's not mentioned is monitoring. So after you have recovered. Could you do regular monitoring to make sure you don't relapse?
It's got to be clear that this is not a human being. I mean, people form a relationship with the prof even though they know he's not real. We don't stop people who are in crisis from accessing a library and taking out a book on self-help. So I don't really think that we should rule them out from using a chatbot. It's just got to be very clear that this is about self-management and it's a tool to facilitate self-management.
Yeah, I think following on from what you're saying, choice is really important. You're not going to stop people from, in whatever state of mind they may be in, perhaps they can use it if they are motivated to do so. It seems to me that one of the biggest problems that people have been talking about quite a lot this morning was about adoption and implementation anyway. So, people being actually motivated to engage with something is a big question in the first place. So that's where, obviously my argument is, again, to come back to the co-design with people who potentially would be the end users.
Excellent, thank you. There was a question, yes, this man.
Hello. So I think it's interesting reframing the question, actually, because what's interesting to me is what is the difference between what we're calling chatbots at the moment and other digital therapies, in which I very much believe in the potential of. But I'd say most chatbots, or in fact all chatbots that I've seen, are really interfaces for already existing treatment pathways that are fairly rigid in their deployment. And so why do we need, what's the value in that system of an ersatz human to communicate with? And why is that a necessary thing? Because the idea represented by the thesis here, a real AI therapist, we're very, very long way away from. That is a system that would represent a whole bunch of new challenges. But at the moment, we have these, personable interfaces, perhaps I call them instead. Are they really qualitatively very different from everything else out there? And what's the value of the pretend person?
Okay, a few things. So first of all, I think if you talk about a virtual human as a therapist, or an avatar therapist like that, I think you're assuming that you're using natural language to interact with it, and you're assuming that a lot of the quality of the interaction comes from the fact that you are using natural language to engage with this virtual human who uses natural language back to you. So there is the assumption that you are mimicking a social context, and that helps in both the monitoring, as in both in enlisting the sort of the behavior that will allow this machine to diagnose. because we know, gaze aversion happens in social context, that kind of stuff. We're not sure whether that helps, but I'll talk about that later. Then the other thing is that treatment, that perhaps you are creating a therapeutic bond with this virtual human that is bigger than with a text interface, and therefore the therapy might be bigger. These are big ifs in a sense, but they're guided by the observations actually that the relation with a therapeutic is important.
Are you truly using, I mean, so there are many chatbots that will use natural language processing, but is it ever really a natural conversation? I've yet to experience one.
Well, if you talk to the likes of Oliver Lemon, you can come up with, you will see some pretty convincing chatbots. So they've won the Alexa challenge recently. We are working towards more emotionally, socially skilled agents that have some idea of who you are, how old you are, what emotional state you're in, what you already know. In the end, you're talking about theory of mind sort of relations, and no, it's not perfect yet, but we are making very rapid progress. So I don't know where we'll go. I don't know where we will end.
And so the value is in that sort of
that's okay.
human
that's based on the
relationship,
assumption
so to
that
speak.
we've observed that this social relation is valuable, right? And that is now one of the things that we need to check.
Can we quantify that? Yeah. Thanks.
Did anybody else in the panel want to comment on that before we move to the next question?
I think it's a very, very good question, because I think, just simply computerizing existing therapy models is I don't know. I mean, I'm yet to be convinced that is valuable. But, I think, again, I think my question comes back about the evidence and what we actually know about the evidence, and particularly in relation to people who, to what extent people are more motivated. Some people may be more motivated to engage with computers who will not engage with people. If we have really good evidence about that, which we have hints about, I think, but, I think those things are important. But the language, natural language, what language? And are we creating some more barriers for people who do not speak English, for example, as a first language? So.
Thank you. The last question is 2 rows forward. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kevin. I've worked as a psychotherapist in the health service and privately for all my life, but I've been always aware of the importance of families to all of us. Families define who we are, whether it's because they've nurtured and nourished us and we've taken a lot on board, or we react against them or whatever. So that shows the importance of relationships in how each of us arrived where we are now. And I suppose I'm agnostic about whether chatbots will be helpful or not, may well be, but I wouldn't like to see that happen at the expense of relationships and the importance of relationships in all our lives.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I think we all agree.
Which side are you on?
So just because someone's using a virtual therapist, it doesn't mean that virtual therapist can't encourage them to talk to their partner. Sleeping is often a joint activity. And so it does depend what the therapist is saying. It's not saying that this is a bubble and you can only interact with that therapist. And to be completely clear, Sleepio also has an online community where people can interact with other users. Some people use it, some people don't. But this is part of an overall picture. The motion is about whether we can bridge the gap, not necessarily fill the entire gap, but can we make progress towards reaching that 5 million people outside treatment?
Okay, we're going to have to draw the debate here in the room to an end. This is just the start of the debate on this very, very important motion. We would invite you to carry on the debate via Twitter, and you can do so that you can tweet your response to this motion at #MindTech2017. Please do take a few minutes, think about where you stand. When you think about it again next week, send a quick tweet, and let's keep this important discussion going out there in cyberspace. I would like to give my great thanks to our wonderful panelists for illuminating this complicated issue for us so very well. And before we end the debate, I'd like to try and see whether the motion has been carried or not. So could we ask the House to vote again on whether they think virtual human chatbot therapists can bridge whatever the treatment gap is in mental health care? Please put a hand up. I'm going to declare the motion just about carried, I think. I think there's a few more hands up, so I think the motion is carried. I also think the motion is carried because I think I've become convinced. Thank you very much. Just before we go, there is coffee again back in the Oslo room. The wonderful posters are in the Dorchester room, and Chris has an announcement about posters now.
That's a quick announcement. Yeah. Thank you, and you'll have a chance to thank the team for a fantastic debate. We have a presentation. I'm delighted to be able to give our award for the Best Poster Prize. We have some fantastic posters this year, and the lucky winner is Camilla Babbage. Is Camilla... So as Camilla makes her way down, Camilla's poster was entitled, "What technology do young people use and want to manage for their well-being?" And Camilla is a PhD student at the University of Nottingham. It's completely independent, this judgment. A £50 Amazon voucher.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was great. Well done. And I'd just like to thank our panel, Lucy Willingham from Cypher. Lucy, thank you. Sarah Stokes from Nottinghamshire Healthcare Trust, and Chris Taylor from University of Manchester and New Mind. Thank you for the panel. And again, thank you for our fantastic panel in this debate. Thank you.